happy to have a good relationship with our neighbor across the disappearing snowbanks in the backyard. Women's Studies and Religion, we try to work together on certain projects. We already have some plans in mind for next year together. And it's just great to have these events here. And when we see today's event, Yakir Englander's event, he's a special friend of the center. We've been having a series of fellows breakfasts during the year. And Yakir's been a regular member at many of them. And so it's nice to be able to hear a more extended presentation of his work today. So thanks for coming, and thanks again for making this possible.
Thank you, Frank. And I will just mention, as I see our lines getting a little longer, I'll keep talking. First of all, before I introduce Yakir, I'd like to invite you all to the next lecture in this series, which will be the last Women's Studies and Religion lecture for the year, which will be presented by Jennifer Lee. Is Jennifer here? Well, she will be momentarily. But on April 28th, Tuesday, April 28th, in the Braude room, she will be presenting her WSRP research. Her topic is Queer the New Black, Gender and Sexual Aspects of Afro-Diasporic Justice in the United States. And that will be, as I said, on April 28th from 12 to 1:30 in the Braude room. And Tracy will also have a wonderful lunch for us then, as she always does. Thank you, Tracy. It is a great pleasure to introduce Yakir Englander, who has been a wonderful presence in the Carriage House, in the Women's Studies and Religion conversations, and here at the school, with the many hats that he wears in a diverse group of fields in the academy and beyond. Yakir came to us most recently from Northwestern University, where he had a postdoctoral instructor position in Jewish Studies, funded by a Fulbright, the Rabin Fulbright Fellowship, which was a great honor for him to receive. Before that, he was a doctoral student and earned his doctorate from the Hebrew University in Jerusalem in Jewish philosophy in conjunction with gender studies. His dissertation there, The Perception of the Male Body in Lithuanian Ultra-Orthodox Society during the last 60 years, and its ramifications for understanding the human subject and the world, became his second book with the similar title, which will be published this summer in Hebrew. His first book was also published in Hebrew, entitled The New Discourse in Religious Zionist Law on Sexuality and the Body, with Professor Avi Sagi. It has been published in Hebrew, and this summer will be coming out in English from the Academy Press, and we look forward to that. Those two books, as well as 24 articles on Jewish theology and the body and sexuality and gender, tell you about one of Yakir's hats, his academic brief. He also has a whole other life as a peace activist. He served from 2007 to 2012 as director of Kids for Peace, Israel and Palestine, an interfaith educational program for Jewish, Muslim, and Christian children in Jerusalem, Jaffa, Ramallah, Bethlehem, and the surrounding areas. And he now serves as vice president of Kids for Peace International, with its extended programs in those locations and also in Europe and the United States. I hope that this person, who I can't remember her name, but she's probably here, somebody who met you in that capacity sent an ecstatic, there you are, thank you so much. What's your name?
Marie.
Marie sent this ecstatic email to me about how great it is to be able to hear Yakir's scholarship, because she had met him with Kids for Peace and heard him play the violin, something we haven't done yet. But now that she's outed you, that will be one of our next opportunities. So Yakir has this whole other hat as a peace activist. I really see his most important role as the translator between these two areas. And really he's, what I think made Yakir so appealing to us as a research associate is his role as a translator and connector between the academy and the Haredi or Ultra-Orthodox community. He's really unique in the way that he has brought the beauty and learning of ultra-Orthodox and traditional methods of study, text study, and wisdom into the academy, and brought academic theory of feminist scholarship and gender theory. He's also able to translate that back to the Haredi community. And he's really playing an extraordinarily important role doing this. And so today we will get a little taste of his role as a Jewish theologian and translator.
Okay, what I can say after that. Thank you, Anne, so much for giving me and for others as scholars and friends the gift to learn together. It's so, the academic life has its nature, but we need to remember that the academic life is one portion of the world, and it's a gift. I mean, it's not something normal that people can dedicate part of their life to study and to learn together. And the academy in different places work in different ways. And to be here, it's, I mean, if there is heaven, it's a little bit like what I have this year. I want to thank you, Anne. I want to thank Women's Studies in the Divinity School. I want to thank Frank and the Center for doing all the work which is not only academy, but play between academy and life, because religion happens also outside in the world. And I want to thank my good 4 colleagues who are next to me during the year, and we learn together, and we share, and the last, but most important maybe, because the Mishnah said that I learned a lot from my friends. I learned a lot from my rabbis. I learned more from my friends, but most of all, I learned from my students. And my students, it's one of the best people I ever met, and they push me grow, as the Talmud says. So thank you for that. Thank you for the students of my course. Thank you for the students of the Dafa Shavui that we study Talmud together. Thank you all. Now I am a little bit nervous because this room is not just my academic colleagues. I have here my rabbis, I have here my mentors, I have here so many beautiful people, my religious spirit leaders, so many gifts in one room. I also could speak almost in Hebrew. I mean, maybe we need to do it. But we will, since we have a few English speakers, I will respect you. Okay, so now let's try to dedicate the coming 50 minutes and to learn together, to think together. And I'm really looking forward to your question answers, mostly questions, where you can think with me and help me to think better. We will come to the sources later. I want to explain what I try to do and then what I want to do today. When we speak about the ultra-Orthodox world, I see, and in the academy, I see 3 kinds of research. There is a lot of research which try to explain and tell people in academy, or maybe even people who read academy stuff who are not in the academy, about the ultra-Orthodox Haredi world. Many times, or sometimes they tell mostly the juicy part, the gossip, Sometimes they really try to tell us what's going on there. This kind of research I don't do. I'm not interested even a bit to share with people outside of the ultra-Orthodox world what's happening there. Why? I mean, there are many other people who do it. And also because I'm not sure why to do it. I mean, the ultra-Orthodox world never asks the academy to intervene in their life. They don't want that we will bother them. They don't want to bother us. Why to do it? Now, it's important, but the question is how we do it, the sensitivity. The second kind of research we have when people from academy, they try to understand places where ultra-Orthodox world or fundamental societies meet together with general societies, and there are clashes. And then there is a responsibility. I mean, we must intervene, right? I mean, if there are buses in Jerusalem which drive inside the ultra-Orthodox community and they separate between gender, it's one thing. As a state, we also have responsibility for that, right? But it's one thing. But if there are buses which do not go only inside the ultra-Orthodox communities in Jerusalem or in Israel, but they go also to other places where women and men who are not ultra-Orthodox, they also use this public transformation, then it's another question, right? There is also a third kind of work, which is to try to go back to theory and to try to see what we can learn by using theory from this community and how we can take the secular Western, whatever we call it, life, and how we can bring something very important and to translate it back to them. Okay? This is more what I try to do in my research. I thanks the life which makes me to grow up in the ultra-Orthodox community. I thanks life and myself for leaving the community, but I never left totally, completely. Life is complicated. We travel. And as travelers, we try to be, it's better to be sensitive and to remember that we travel, but they never chose to travel. So I have responsibility to them who never chose to travel. And also, maybe we can show something to each other and help. My work here, this year, at Harvard, in the Women's Studies, is to think about the walls that we have in the ultra-Orthodox world, mostly against or with problematic ways with women. Because with men, I wrote my PhD, and it's like, I feel that I gave what I could give. But now, how the life of women are shaped by these walls. And I don't speak just about walls, even that the walls also separate. If you think about the most holy wall of the Jewish people, the Western Wall, it separates between genders, right? And not all women, not even all Jewish women in the world are happy about that. Many Jewish American women, they want to pray in the way how they feel connection with holiness, with spirituality. They just cannot do it. Because there is not just the wall between genders, there is also the wall of voice. Which voices can be heard and which voices cannot be heard. There are other walls in Jerusalem, as we know. There is the wall which separates between Palestinians and Israelis. Right? And different people understand this wall in different ways. There are walls of separation of buses, sometimes of streets, sometimes the separation between the holy. Now there are more and more ultra-Orthodox synagogues which do not even have women's section. Okay. And they just tell women, you are so holy that you do not need to come to the synagogue. Now, and there are many walls that the Western society has and the Ultra-Orthodox world do not have. For example, walls between men and men, and ways of touching and being in connection between men and men, women and women. Okay? We have many walls. There are the walls of how we date. There are the walls even on campuses. And they do not have these walls. It's very interesting. So when I'm looking on walls, I want to look on all kinds of walls and to try to use theory, as I will do today, in order to learn something. Okay? Something. It doesn't mean I don't have the whole picture. But I can maybe show something, and by that make them to understand better themselves and the choices that they do. But I also want to wish for you that you will also take these thoughts and translate it to your life. Because I'm not going to critique them in order to critique them today. If I do it, I only do it when I meet with them, not with you. What I'm doing here today is to think about them in order that we can, after that, think about what do we do about these questions. Okay? Therefore, what I want to do today is to go back. I want to go to the beginning of the Ultra-Orthodox community in Israel, which means most of the Ultra-Orthodox community in Israel, which means after the Holocaust. And the Holocaust destroyed, as you know, the Jewish community in Europe, and for sure the Eastern European Jewish community. And the Ultra-Orthodox world, when they came after the Holocaust, the survivors, they came back. I mean, they didn't come back. They went to United States, or to Australia, or to Palestine, which became later the State of Israel. They had to deal with communities which they didn't know before. Okay? Communities who welcomed them, but they also wanted to be welcome, but also to be separated. And what I want to think is about the systems that they did after the Holocaust in order to create this kind of community. It's also a very interesting moment after the Holocaust because today we almost do not have women, Ultra-Orthodox, maybe sometimes I will say Haredi, it's easier for me, Haredi women who write. Okay? We have women who write sometimes, in journals with names which is not exactly their names, blah, blah, blah. But we don't have books which were written by women. Now, after the Holocaust, no one could tell women do not write to the survivors. Okay? And Yael Shenkar, she's also from the Hebrew University, she's writing a lot of research about the Ultra-Orthodox writing a woman who writes today. I'm going back. Okay? Now, we need to remember that there are two kinds of writings about women. There are the writings of the women themselves, and there are the writings of the rabbis or the leaders who write about women. Okay? So I'm going today to focus mostly on the writings of women. Academy we already showed, not me, but the scholars, they showed that we need to make a differentiation between writings before the 60s and after the 60s in the Ultra-Orthodox world. After the 60s, the books are not written anymore by survivors, but they are written or edited by rabbis. Okay? That they gather hundreds of stories, okay? That some of them happened and some of them we know that they never happened. And they put it, according to their narrative it's happened, but we know that it's never happened. And they put it under categories, okay? Because they want to push their ideology. For example, if you look in the books, in the Haredi books after the 60s, you will not find Rabbi Zomba from the ghetto Warsaw, because he was one of the leaders of the rebellion of the Warsaw ghetto. And his story just doesn't exist. It's like the Zionists, the Bond, they made the rebellion against the Nazi. We, the Ultra-Orthodox world, we will never do it. It's against all the Jewish ideology. The Jewish ideology, not Ultra-Orthodox ideology, but for them it's the Jewish ideology. But we have also the writings of women and men before the 60s, which were written by survivors. They tried to write about what no one can write. It's a broken speaking. Okay? It's like the writings where you feel that the words cannot really describe what happens. Now, I'm not going to deal today about the historical question. What I want to look at that as literature. I want to look at that as something that creates, designs the society itself. I want to look on the choices, unconsciously, most of the time, probably, of the writers, why they choose to go to describe the event in one way, and some others did it in a different way. And there is one term which come back again and again, which is Kiddush Hashem, sanctification of the name. Sanctification of the name, it's a term in Jewish theology which come already from the Talmud, after that during the Crusade, and then it get critiqued in modern time and came back big time in the Holocaust, and today with the conflict with the Palestinians, mostly with the Arab world, and it's about the obligation of a Jew to kill himself in some situations. Okay? Why? Why to kill yourself? Because you do not represent only yourself in the world, you also represent the Jewish God. And there are moments that you need to choose in your life. Are you going to betray your intimate relationship with the Jewish God? Or that you say, no, I prefer to be with my God than to betray her or him, whatever. Okay? Now we need to ask the question, what exactly are these situations, right? I mean, we need to go deeper. I mean, as a Jew, you have also other choices as a human being. For example, when someone tries to tell you, or that you, let's say, convert to, let's say, something which is not part of the Judaism, Buddhism, or that you will keep being an ultra-Orthodox Jew, you can also fight, right? Sometimes with weapon, but also if you do not have a weapon, you also can choose to fight. But the Jews who work with Kiddush Hashem, with sanctification of the name, they understood that fighting is not the way how we can show our respect, love, and connection to our God. Now, some people will tell you because the Jews didn't have the power to fight. But if we look on other cultures, we see other people who didn't have power, but they choose to fight. Now, I don't say what is better or not. We will work with that. But I want to look on the choices. It's not even an option. The role of women in Jewish history with Kiddush Hashem, with the sanctification of the name, is the symbolic of what all Jews need to do. Which means that when most of the time, or the main role models of what does it mean Kiddush Hashem, come from women. It starts with the Midrash about Hannah, or Miriam, the daughter of Miriam bat Tanchum, the daughter of Tanchum, who convinced her 7 children, according to the narrative, right, not to worship the idols. And then she jumped, after they killed her 7th child, she went to the roof and jumped to her death. And then a voice, bat kol, a feminine voice of God came from heaven and quotes the verse from Psalms 1:13, like a joyful mother of children. So ironic. And it's not, and it totally makes sense that one of the most important books, theological books of the post-Holocaust Haredi world, by Rabbi Teichtel, the title of the book is Ema Banim Smecha, like a joyful mother of children. Okay? Because we come back to this narrative and we duplicate it. The most important stories that we have about Kiddush Hashem in the Haredi world during the Holocaust is a story that never happened. It's a story about 93 Bet Yaakov, which means women who study in the Haredi system of education, which was created kind of a few centuries, just before the Holocaust. And they were taken on a boat by the Nazi to serve as prostitutes, and they decided to kill themselves. So this became like the model of Kiddush Hashem during the Holocaust. Now, why 93? So we can go there, we can go more Kabbalistic. What is the symbol of 100 in Kabbalah? And then it's 100 minus 7, because the 7 is the place of 7. We can go all over. It's very clear how the story designed. But what is important, that this become the example of Kiddush Hashem during the Holocaust. So in order to understand what exactly were the choices of Haredi rabbis or Haredi writers and Haredi female writers, I want to use one theory and to try to go back. Let's leave the stories. Before we will come back to the stories and we will read them, let's try to use a theory. Okay? And I begin with the cultural linguistic project of Orit Kamir, who was also my mentor in my PhD, focused on the Hebrew word kavod. So we have a few Hebrew words today. We have the Haredi, the Ultra-Orthodox. We have a Kiddush Hashem, sanctification of the name. And we have now kavod. And Orit Kamir tried to understand what does it mean exactly kavod in Hebrew. So as Kamir notes, a word in one language may have several counterparts in another language with different and even contradictory meanings. In the case of the Hebrew word kavod, there is no single equivalent in English, but rather several meanings that conflict with each other. One is honor, one is dignity, the third is glory, which is connected to God, and the fourth is respect. Today I will focus only on honor, dignity, and a little bit about glory. In honor societies, honor equals an individual's desired social status, perceived as property, assets, and possessions. Honor may be acquired during an individual's lifetime through fulfillment with social norms by appropriate normative behavior. An individual may gain honor in a social community through honorable behavior, and one person may also seize the honor of another. Living in an honor society is a zero-sum game. When one person gains honor, someone else loses it. An honor society often preserves its honor through exclusion of certain dishonorable individuals, groups, and nations. In Europe, for example, Jews were for centuries, in some places, not considered honorable, which means that they are not even in the play that someone can take their honor or they can gain honor. They could not, for instance, be challenged to duel, since in honor societies, the duel was a means for resolving honor conflicts between peers. This is a very important point, since Jews had to tell themselves an inner Jewish narrative where actually they have honor. Honor societies are not essentially humanistic, since they do not teach, as humanism does, that all human beings are equal to each other. I do not claim that from a humanistic perspective, members of honor societies lack dignity or the image of God. The argument here is that honor cultures, by definition, are not humanistic. From the other side, we have dignity societies or dignity culture. Dignity as opposed to honor is understood as a universal value and worth of any and every human person, regardless of gender, race, age, class, or group affiliation. Human dignity is an inherent value ascribed to the category human. It is therefore inherent in the human nature of every human being, in the humanity of every member of the human category. We can think of it as a stamp of human quality that is imprinted in each of us. It is important to stress that as a value, dignity is an ethical oath and not an empirical factual is. It is normative and not, human dignity does not depict people's empirical value. It constitutes them as normatively worthly merely because they are human. Because we believe that all humans are identical in their human nature and partake equal in the human category, they also partake equally in the inherent human value, human dignity. Human dignity is thus an abstract ethical sphere in which all humans are equal. Now, I want to take an example which will explain much better. Okay, now that if you will look on the historical text, it doesn't work. But if you look how Jewish people use a text, it works very well. So, for example, there is a Mishnah which says that if someone kills, now comes the question, what exactly? Yes, it's like as if this person kills the whole world. But there are two kind of writings of this Mishnah. In some of the writings it says, if a human being kills a human being. In some writings of the Mishnah it says, if someone kills someone from Israel, it's like that you kill the whole world. Now, I will not go to the historical part, because it will not work. But if you look how some rabbis today, they use this text, mostly with the Israeli-Palestinian conflict, you can understand something very deeply about honor and dignity culture. Because some rabbis use this text and they said, if someone kills someone from Israel, then it likes that you kill the whole world. Which means that according to this reading, not everyone is equal as human being. Because in honor societies, by definition, you honor, it's not something that you were born with. Jews in the history many times were not born with honor. D'Artagnan, he grew up in honor culture, but he didn't have honor. So by going to the Mousquetaire, he tried to gain honor. The problem is that when he met with Partos, the first thing that he did, he tackled him on the street, and he opened Partos' jacket, and everyone saw that Partos' jacket is a very old and cutting one. It's not a real honorable. So he showed his shame. So Partos had to invite D'Artagnan to a duel. Because this is the only way to solve the honor conflict. Because in a real honor society, if someone comes to someone with honor and he just tackled him on the street, the honorable person needs zero-sum game, needs to do something very radical, like just kill him. Okay? So this is an honor society. Now, Europe, after the French Revolution, moved all the time between honor and dignity values. We can see how some values of, for example, the Jewish Enlightenment, where they said that even Jews are part of the game, this was a shift toward a dignity society. But it didn't work, and this is what Herzl felt. This is what the Chada'am felt. Okay? Okay, this is what the Zionist movement tried to do. They tried to create honorable Jewish people. Some of them. Some others, they said, no, we don't try to play this game. What we try is to create an equal society where everyone is equal, a dignity society. Now, the Holocaust hurts and makes the life of the Ultra-Orthodox community very problematic. Why? Because the Ultra-Orthodox community had a system how to struggle with Jewish suffering. And it was by Kiddush Hashem, which means I do not play the regular honorable game, which means if someone will punch me, I will not punch back as a real honorable man need to do. But what I'm doing, I'm shifting the story to a story, a narrative, which the real fight, the real conflict is not with me and this non-Jew who tried to hurt me. The real conflict is between my God and the other powers, the evil. And then the game is very different. So I'm doing Kiddush Hashem, which means that for example, during the crusade, if someone come to the Jew and said, or that you are going to become Christian, or that you are going to be killed, the person has an option. It's or his body or his soul. Or to play with honorable regular game with body, to fight back, or to shift the conflict to a spiritual conflict between souls. It's not about his sword. It's about my God that I represent in the world and the evil, which try to take the honor of my Jewish God. So I say, I will kill myself. Take my body, it's nothing. But I gain honor and I keep the honor of my God. And they gain shame, which is the other side of the coin. The Holocaust didn't help the Jewish to do it, because the German didn't ask their soul. The German didn't care less. Even if you were Christian, but your grandfather was Jewish, you go in on the same train, and there is no first class. You just go the same, to the same gas. So nothing worked with the Jewish story. And for the Ultra-Orthodox people, like many other Jewish communities, they had to tell a story, a narrative that can hold them. How I'm going to deal with this suffering. The Zionist movement in Israel, till Eichmann, the court, they play also with honor, culture, story. They blame the Jews, the European Jews, not to be real men, real new Jews. And they told them, how did you walk katzon letevach, like cows to the slaughterhouse? They shamed them. And the Zionist movement in the beginning of the State of Israel, they told the story about the rebellion in Treblinka, the rebel in Ghetto Warsaw, the partisan. But all the other survivors didn't have place. They were shameful. Even if you look today, on the day of the memory of the Holocaust, how it calls in Hebrew, Yom HaShoah VeHaGvura, which means, how you will translate Gvura in English? Heroism. It's the day that we dedicate for the memory of the Holocaust is the Yom, the day of the Holocaust, and heroism till today. What if I was not hero? Oh, you don't have a place. Now the Ultra-Orthodox world didn't work with this system, so they didn't have a place, and they decided Nazis, the ultra-Orthodox community decided to go and to take and to create a narrative of the story of the Holocaust, where the Nazi didn't really try to kill all Jews. I mean, they tried to kill all Jews. But what they really tried to do is to kill the Jews who look like Jewish, which means ultra-Orthodox. Therefore, they start telling the stories about the rabbis who didn't agree to shave, as the Nazi demand from them. They didn't agree to take their pious, and therefore they look like Jews, and they were killed first by the German. I want to take our handout and to read with you one example. And Anne, I asked that would you agree, please, to read for us? So source number 1 from Hapardes.
There were 30 young men, students at the Krakow yeshiva, who, when they received the order to work in German factories making implements of murder, refused. They would not comply with this order, not wanting to aid and abet the criminals, or participate in the readying of weapons for the killing of whole peoples. 30 weaklings they were, 30 pale, thin, and stooped yeshiva buchers. Morally, however, they stood tall. 30 human shadows rebelled in the name of the Torah against the might of the idolatrous Nazi war machine. For a full year, they continued day and night in their study of Torah. They knew what lay in store for them, but they had settled their accounts with the world and with life. As they sat and studied, they dealt only with the purity of the soul.
Please keep going.
Continue?
Yes. Thank you.
One day, the impure Nazis discovered them, and they were imprisoned. Impervious to their surroundings, the 30 young men continued their studies even in the Nazi prison. They refused to be redeemed by impure food, surviving only on water and moldy bread. Finally, they were condemned to death. Their last request was to be allowed to share a final meal. They sat together, dressed in the white garments of Yom Kippur, and wrapped in their prayer shawls. When the meal was finished, they went out dancing as comrades, their arms around each other's shoulders. Embracing thus, they began the sacred dance. A dark terror descended upon their Nazi guards. The officer in charge of the execution squad cried, "You have defeated us. We have power over your bodies, but we have no power over your souls."
Thank you so much. So you can hear the voice of honor societies. Okay? I mean, it's clear that they are going to die. But what is important here, that they recreated the division between soul and body. That when we look when we read historian publishing on the Holocaust, the Nazis couldn't care less about the soul. The ideology was a bodily ideology. But in order to tell the story, they had to make this differentiation. A little note is that the kittel, the dress, the jacket that we put on Yom Kippur, you also bury in these clothes. So it's like they prepare themselves for death. And impure food, the purity, because in the language of Kiddush Hashem, what is important is not to fight like men, but to keep your purity. In other words, I will say, in gender words, I will say, that the Kiddush Hashem, it's a way that many times in honor societies, women play or women behave in that way, which means that in many honorable societies, when someone comes to rape a woman when her husband is on fight in the war, she should not kill the raper. What she needs to do is not to let the raper to take her body, her inner body, by killing herself. And the Jewish Kiddush Hashem, the term of Kiddush Hashem, play with this kind of behavior. Now, when we come to the writings of women after the Holocaust, we find a problem. The problem is that the women survivors didn't tell this kind of story. And they didn't walk with the narrative of the ultra-Orthodox world. They play also with honor language, but a male honor language. And they also blame Jewish men for not behave with honorable behavior. And this became a very problematic for the rabbis. In other words, if in honorable language, in honorable culture, we have men behavior and women or female behavior, men needs to fight and women needs to keep their purity of their body, Haredi women wanted to behave like men and not like women. So when the rabbis try to tell the story of how Jewish people, they behave and they kept of the purity of their bodies, the women demand from them, why you didn't fight? Why you were not with us? And we speak about Haredi women. So I want to take a few examples so you can feel it, and then to close and to say a few words about how it moved to our life today. So can you please, Anne, read for us source number 5. It's come from the book written by Rebbetzin Rivka Wolbe, which was the wife of Rabbi Shlomo Wolbe, one of the main top rabbis of the Ultra-Orthodox Lithuanian rabbis. Yes.
I was aware that the non-Jews living in the apartment behind ours knew us and apparently respected my father. May God avenge his blood. It is not a surprise that even Gentiles respected and honored him. Father had a noble and handsome appearance, his bright blue eyes illuminating a face framed by a blonde beard. His noble appearance prompted everyone who saw him to honor him. Wherever he walked, people used to gather around to look at him, even non-Jews, and they would make way for him to show him honor. It was no wonder then, I went on to think on that bitter morning, that the Gentiles respected him, and for that reason, miraculously, did no harm to his family.
Thank you so much. Look how her description is very different than the first descriptions that we saw. In the first description, the Jews were killed, but they were killed as Jews. Her father survived. I mean, later he died, but he survived in this event because he looked like what? He looks like European, with like an honorable European man. The blue eyes, right? I mean, how he looks like. Now, it's not surprise for me, and if you understand a little, if you know that the Haredi theology, you know that there is one portion which tried to be very honorable men. It's called Slobodka. So her father was one of the top rabbis of Slobodka. But it's totally different way. Now, one more thing that I want you to remember. When she speaks about her honorable father, what happened to him? No one touched him. What does it say about the other Jews? What if they would look like honorable European men? Okay? We can see maybe something in her language which push for something. Now I want to give another example from another top Rebbetzin, a woman not rabbi, but a wife of a rabbi, Batsheva Schwartz. So can you please read for us? And you will see, I think, in her words, some critique on the Jewish ultra-Orthodox behavior. So source number 6.
Around the edge of a huge pit, they were beaten and tortured until their dying breath. Orders were given to the victims that they must strike each other. Of Rabbi Zalman Bloch, may God avenge his blood, it is told that he was tortured terribly as he died. The accursed perpetrators even forced the other victims to take part in these acts, so indescribably horrible that they cannot be written down without losing all honor. The head of the yeshiva, too, collapsed into the end of the pit, although the blows had not yet killed him. His yeshiva students, who were ordered by the Nazis to cover him with sand, reported that they heard him sanctify the holy name of God by reciting the Shema.
It's so hard, but even that it's so hard, we need to be sensitive, but I want to go and to look on what she says. She speaks about the rabbi, she speaks about, but in this case what we learn, that the Jews hurt each other. It's more than that. She speaks about the Rosh Yeshiva, the rabbi, who was shot and thrown to the pit. But he was not dead. Right? Now the German forced his students to do what? To cover him, to kill him. Now she's a Haredi Rebbetzin. She knows the Jewish law. It's not so clear that in the Jewish law, if you know that the person is alive, you can kill him. Even if it's on the account of your name, of your life. Because there are 3 things that a Jew needs to do to die and not to act. One of them is when you are told, kill someone, you need to tell them, kill myself. I'm not going to kill him. Now, the behavior of the Jews is critiqued here by the Rebbetzin. And this is very problematic in ultra-Orthodox ideology. And the last source that I want to read with you, and it's one of many, and you can see even here in source 7 and 8, we'll read only source 7, is what happened when Jewish Haredi men do not behave with honorable male behavior. And then women come and do it instead of them. So please, the last source.
She also saw from her window a large number of Jews being led away, and among them the honored Markin family. The whole crowd was walking stooped over, heads bowed in shame, everyone except Mrs. Markin. She was walking with her head held high and with her firm steps, upright and proud. She was not humiliated, nor was she ashamed of her Jewishness. To the contrary, she was proud of her Hebrew origins.
Thank you. So we have 5 minutes. Now what I want to do in these 5 minutes is to look again on my claim and to try to make it, I hope, clear, more clear. When you have trauma, you must create a narrative to your trauma in order to hold it. If you will look on the other sources, I brought you 2 beautiful sources of 2 rabbis who didn't agree to take the honor path at all. They choose to blame not the German, and not God, and not anything but humanity. And even more than that, they speak about how they became like the Nazi. Okay, and then the conclusion is that now that we are living in the state of Israel, we must behave with the knowledge that we too can become Nazis. This is a whole another direction. But today I focus only on the narrative of honor. And what I try to say is that even in honor culture, there are two paths. One that mostly men must take, and the second that women most of the time must take. One is to fight, and it doesn't matter if you have wars or any weapon, but you need to fight in order to keep the honor of your society. And the second one is, in a way, to commit suicide or to keep that no one touch your inner body. Because then you lose your purity. And Kiddush Hashem play with this direction, which means that Jewish people see themselves as a nation, the wife of the Jewish male, which is not the men Jews, but the men, the Jewish God. And as women cannot ask the question, where is my man who doesn't protect me? Jews, if they want to keep their honor, cannot ask the question, where was God in the Holocaust? Because then you lose your honor. From the 60s, the rabbis still today try to create this narrative to be the main narrative of the Haredi community. You Zionists have your heroism, we have our honor narrative. The problem with the writings of women after the Holocaust, that they do not go in that direction. They try to go to the direction of male behavior in honor societies and to fight. Where you all have shame, she stood up and shows the Nazis that no one can take her. Right? That she has her honor. What we see from the 60s, that the rabbis do not let to publish and to print anymore these kinds of books. Instead of that, they created books about women in the Holocaust with hundreds of stories inside. But when I read all these stories and I went back to the books themselves, do you know what I find? That none of these books were written by ultra-Orthodox women. It's unbelievable. They were written by religious women, but not ultra-Orthodox. What we see today in the ultra-Orthodox world is exactly this purity narrative. We must keep as Jews the purity. So before it was against the Nazi, today we need to keep our purity against the Western society. And we need to behave as women to keep our purity. But since male do not have law, halakha, Jewish law about purity, so who in the end of the day needs to keep this law? Ultra-Orthodox women. And it's not a surprise that if we keep this narrative, we see the walls of gender which focus on purity and an impurity growing and growing. I want to say the last sentence. And the last sentence is that in the language of honor, it's all in the Haredi version. It's not about just we and them, but we all have honor. But it's between we and our God, as I said. we the woman of God and God as our man. And in that language, it's not just that we are not all equal, but also we are not all exactly humans. And the problem is that sometimes I find, and I see it in the last years more and more in the Ultra-Orthodox world, that the language when they speak about, for example, the other or the Arabs, is also not a language of us as human beings that we do not agree with, that maybe we fight with, but it's the same language that we find in their literature about the Holocaust. It's we who need to keep the honor of our God, and them who work with the powers of the devil, of the evil powers, to try to kill us. And the walls between the genders and the walls between nations are growing and growing and growing. My prayer is that by showing and by showing and looking on the ways how narratives are created, we can help societies to understand better their choices in order to give them the option to choose maybe different, as we also need to do. Thank you so much. Of course.
Yakir will take questions.
Yes, please. Just can you say your first name?
I'm Donnie Pessa.
Hi, Donnie.
I'm curious, you said that this narrative of victimhood and needing to keep purity, so therefore the Ultra-Orthodox community views themselves as the wives of God. How does that then lead to greater gender segregation within the Haredi community?
Thank you. Is it okay that I will take another question and then I will answer? Any marks, feelings, questions? Yes. Please. Hi, Rabbi Steve.
Hi. There are these narratives that were shaped post-Holocaust of women who, in order not to be immodestly exposed, a whole bunch of them, and I remember being taught this in youth group,
Yes.
that they would take pins and sew their dresses to their skin as they were going to be dragged, through the town and whatever. I just want to kind of portray, were those stories written by women or written by men? In other words, are we also seeing that the narratives around women are written by men in order to construct women in a particular way?
Yes, so this story, so I will answer to Danny, right? And to Rabbi Steve questions. I will start with you, Rabbi Steve. Yes, you are right. I mean, this story about the pins that they put in order that their dress, they would not expose their bodies, it's written in Haisha Bashoah, the woman in the Holocaust, which was written after the 60s by Rabbi Eibschitz. And it's all these stories that the historical stories were not written by Ultra-Orthodox women. And a lot of the stories, historians says it never happened. But we see these narratives only in these books. When I read the Ultra-Orthodox books of women, it's not mentioned at all. All the question of tzniut, modesty, just doesn't exist. It's like, it doesn't exist. Now, Danny, for your question about
It's also a parrot
please.
story. It's an old parrot story. Lama parrots
Oh.
has its story. It's an old story.
So it's again the narrative which
It's not a
come.
20th century story.
Thank you, Susanna. And for your question, Danny, because what I claim is that because the Ultra-Orthodox community choose the narrative of being as a collective, being the woman of the God, we see a lot of emphasis from the 60s till today on modesty, on how an honorable woman need to behave. But in the end of the day, men Jewish law about modesty and unmodesty doesn't work with men because they don't have this Jewish law. So women are pushed to take this responsibility. Now, women agree to take it, but they read exactly what Rabbi Steve told us, because they read about their grandma that she was in the camps and she put pins in her body. What I'm saying is that this is not the narratives that we see in the ultra-Orthodox woman genre. Thank you. Yes, Jennifer.
I was interested to hear a little bit more about kavod as glory, and specifically the ways that that might help mediate the expressions of honor that are a matter of externalized violence or fight and internalized violence or fight. So how does glory perhaps help to handle that and negotiate between those two those two formulations of honor that you presented?
Right. It's a very complicated question, and I will try to explain. Okay, and complicated, which means that I still try to deal with it. In general, when we speak about glory, which means the image of God which is imprint inside us, it can be played in different ways. It can be the language, how to speak honorable language, honorable culture. It can be also a language, how to speak a dignity culture. And what I think, and this is what I find mostly in Elie Wiesel literature, that he tries to do something third, totally different. He doesn't take the path of honor culture, of honor narrative about the Holocaust. He just doesn't agree, most of the time. He also cannot take the path of dignity culture because he doesn't believe that there is something which called humanism that we can trust. Because he claimed that the behavior of the Nazi, of the Jews in America and in the Holocaust, and he himself in the camp, proved that there is no humanism that we can rely on. He used glory in order to create a narrative where people decide by trusting God to create a society as if there is humanism. Which means he creates a dignity culture when there is no the basic, the philosophical basis of dignity culture. And he used for that glory. And he also demands from us to do it in some ways. It's very clear how we should do it. This is why his literature is so interesting. It's not humanistic literature. It's the alternative to humanistic literature. You are right that many times what we see with glory, that men can take woman behavior in honor culture because they use the term glory. So as I claim, for example, if you see God as the ultimate man, then we human beings do not, even if we are men, we do not need to behave as men in honorable culture, but we can behave as women. And this is the example of the rabbis from the 60s, etc. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Yakir. I learned so much every time you give a talk. I know I pushed you on this before,
Please.
and you said that from this lecture I would hopefully get an answer. And so I'm pushing again
Please.
on the idea of dignity and honor and what constitutes dignity cultures and honor cultures. And I guess as an anthropologist, I take the word culture a bit maybe too seriously. But are you not essentializing certain parts of the world when you assign them as part of honor societies and honor cultures? And for me, honor and dignity is constituted in action and in context everywhere. So when you're assigning honor and dignity specifically,
think that your question, for me, it's not for me so much a question, but it's an ethical demand. I think that this is exactly one of the problems in general, in any theory. Any theory tries to say something truth about the world. Now, I think that the problem is when we take the theory and we look only from this prism. And we say like, oh, this is the world, this is honor culture, this is dignity culture, now everything is clear in the world. I'm not working in the world like that. But what I don't want to do is to leave everything to be just narratives. Because if everything just stay narrative, then the Haredi world can keep doing to women whatever they want, and then everyone can do, it's like a narrative, this is my narrative. So for me, what you ask me to do, and I really try to do it, and this is why, it's one lecture about one piece, about one big problem, what I hope that theory can do is to give us some color. So for example, it's not, many people, scholars still today, never say, and there's so much research about Haredi post-theology, okay? There is so much, like you read again and again the same thing. And they all read the same, we all read the same materials, right? But no one said that women Haredi writings are fundamental different than what the rabbis try to do. They all said, oh, you see, they all speak about Kiddush Hashem, sanctifying the name of God, and everything goes. They all care about just God, and they don't care about that. And what I hope that I try to do today is to show us, no, Haredi women didn't go in the path as the rabbi tried to take, and they won, and they now have the narrative. What I want to say is, listen, if you really want to listen to the survivors, Haredi women took another path. Now, they didn't take the path that I wish they would take, which is totally dignity path, right? As some Hasidic, mostly rabbis took. But they took a totally different path of honor culture. So I don't think that they are honor culture, but I think that this language can show us something about the writings, and then the next step that I must do is to listen to you and to say, oh, you think now, Yakir, that you solved the problems? Oh no, you didn't solve anything, right? It's just one prism to look on the text. Yeah, so thank you so much for demanding it from me. Erez.
Did you find in these books that you talk about pre-60s or after 60s narratives about non-Haredi Jews, like assimilated European Jews or just religious but not fundamentalist Jews? And if you did, do you think that the Holocaust is a breaking point also in the building of the walls between Haredim and not Haredim in Israel today?
Because it's the last question, because of time, so I want to take and to share with you a story from a book of one Hasidic rabbi. Hasidim is the one group inside the Ultra-Orthodox world that he did exactly the opposite. I mean, he took the path of dignity, totally dignity. And after the Holocaust, he didn't agree to be a rabbi again. He wanted to live alone in New York State, not in even the Haredi community. Amazing story. Then they pushed him to become back a rabbi. And he tells the stories like that. He shares the story about Hanukkah in Auschwitz. That the first night of Hanukkah, you say 3 blessings, okay? One about to thank you God for lighting the candles. The second is that God make us miracles. And the third one, thank you God to put me in this moment here now to celebrate, right? So all the Jews come next to him, according to his story, to his narrative, and they come to listen to the blessing. And he says the first one, the second one, and he couldn't say the third. Like what? How much should I lie, right? I mean, how much should I lie? So he's looking, and then he sees someone next to him, and he's like happy, and he blesses the candles, right? The third blessing. So his students came to him after that, and they asked him like, what happened here? So he told them, I just couldn't lie. So what happened? Why did you bless? And he said, I look on the Jew who was standing next to me in Auschwitz. This Jew is a Reform rabbi from my little shtetl. When I saw him in this side of the street, I walked to the other side of the street. Because he's a Reform. Because of Auschwitz, he became my best friend. You know what? If Auschwitz made us Jews to stop fighting amongst ourselves and to live together, I can bless that. And he demanded this rabbi, this Hasidic rabbi, that when he lights the candles every year, after that in Brooklyn, he demands that the invitation will be to all the Reform and Conservative and whatever Jewish communities, right? So this is an example, I think, to something exactly different, but this rabbi chose the dignity path. When people ask him about Kiddush Hashem and that, he said, like, it's all burned in Auschwitz. Now we speak about humanity, not about Jews, not about that. So this is different narrative. Thank you so much. Thank you so much for coming to learn.